She thought she was alone, until a stray dog led her to a man who didn't exist in any records. Some loves arrive like ghosts, haunting us, saving us, and teaching us how to open our hearts again. One autumn evening, when the last of the gold leaves fell across the sidewalks and the lamplights flickered like sleepy fireflies, Maren Jennings noticed the man for the first time. She was late coming home from her job at the bookstore, her scarf wrapped high against the cold, her thoughts heavy with the familiar loneliness that trailed her like a forgotten promise. She lived in a narrow row house on Sycamore Street, just a few blocks from the harbor. For months, a lean, honey-colored stray dog had haunted the alley beside her porch steps. Maren had named him Huckleberry. She'd been leaving out scraps of chicken and bowls of water, and though the dog never let her close enough to touch, he had begun to trust her presence. Every night she'd watch from her window as he slipped out of the shadows and ate, tail wagging in hesitant gratitude. But that evening, clear, cold, the sky already navy, she saw something she hadn't expected. A tall man in a dark wool coat standing beside the dog, one gloved hand stretched out, palm open. In the other, he held a brown paper bag, like the ones she used to pack her father's lunch when she was a girl. Huckleberry was wagging his tail furiously, not just cautious affection, joy, recognition. The dog nuzzled the man's wrist, pressing close in a way he never dared with her. Maren slowed on the sidewalk, hugging her bag of used paperbacks to her chest. She felt a prickle up her spine, the fine hair at her nape lifting. He was turned away from her, so she couldn't see his face, but she noticed the way he stood, graceful, with a faint slant in his shoulders that looked almost sorrowful. She thought, a neighbor maybe? Someone else who feeds the strays? And yet, she had walked this street every evening for nearly 2 years, and never once had she seen another soul offering food to Huckleberry. The man set the paper bag on the ground. The dog sniffed and plunged his nose inside, tail going faster. Maren felt an inexplicable tug in her chest. She took a step forward, meaning to call out a polite hello, but at that moment he turned slightly, just enough for her to glimpse his profile in the yellow lamplight. She stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the strangest thing. His features were clear and distinct, high cheekbones, a sharp jaw, a mouth set in a weary line. Yet the instant she tried to hold on to the details, to fix them in her memory, they slid away as if she were trying to clutch at water. Then he was bending to stroke the dog's head. In the same motion, he turned back to the street and walked into the deeper darkness between houses. No car engine started, no gate squeaked. He simply vanished from sight, and it felt, though she told herself she was imagining it, as if the shadows had swallowed him whole. When she finally walked the rest of the way home, Huckleberry had already eaten every scrap in the bag. He sat expectantly by her porch, his brown eyes bright, watching the place where the man had disappeared. That night, she dreamed of old stories her mother used to tell, ghostly strangers at crossroads, wanderers who carried offerings to the lost, spirits who traveled the earth in borrowed shapes. She woke before dawn, the sheets twisted around her legs, her heart fluttering like a startled bird. Over the next week, she saw him again, always at dusk, always with the same paper bag. Sometimes he was standing, sometimes crouched. Huckleberry would bound to him, tail whirling in ecstatic circles. Each time Maren tried to approach, the man slipped away without a word. She could never catch him leaving. No matter how quickly she crossed the street, she'd find only an empty alley and the dog licking crumbs from the pavement. One evening, she waited on her porch steps, determined not to let him vanish. As he fed the dog, she called out, "Hello, I think you've been taking care of him too." He didn't turn. The shadows hid most of his face, but she thought she saw a flicker of sadness in the slope of his shoulders. When she stepped closer, she noticed a faint scent, like old cedar and something else, something hard to name, a memory of winter fires and forgotten rooms. "Do you live around here?" she asked gently. "I've never seen you." He looked up then. For a heartbeat, she felt as if she were staring into the eyes of someone she'd known long ago, someone she should have recognized. but her mind reeled. She couldn't hold on to the impression. His gaze slid through her, not cruelly, but as if he were already partly somewhere else. She started, but the words died. The man bent, touched the dog's head, and walked into the darkness again. The street was silent except for Huckleberry's quiet panting. Maren sank onto her porch step, shivering. That night, she could not sleep. By November, she began to wait for him every evening. Part of her knew she should feel frightened, a stranger who never spoke, who slipped away like mist. But she didn't. What she felt was a fragile sense of anticipation, a quiet hope she couldn't explain to herself. Sometimes she thought she was losing her mind. Other times she felt sure she was witnessing something that had no place in an ordinary life. She bought extra dog food just in case he stopped coming. She started leaving out blankets for Huckleberry, and all the while she wondered, "Who are you?" One windy night, she found the dog sitting alone beside the steps, guarding a paper bag left neatly on the top stair. Inside was not the usual scraps, but a folded piece of pale stationery. In a spidery hand, someone had written, "I'm sorry." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She looked around wildly, half expecting him to step out from behind a hedge. But the street was empty. She held the note to her chest, as if it might vanish. Sorry for what? She thought. For the strangeness? For the mystery? For something else? The next evening she waited again, holding the note in her pocket. Hours passed. The wind turned colder. No one came. The night after that, and the next, still no sign. Huckleberry paced the sidewalk, whining softly as if searching. Days blurred together. Thanksgiving came and went. The lampposts glittered with white holiday lights. She kept hoping she would see the tall shape in the dark coat, the gloved hand setting down a paper bag. But the man did not return. December settled over the harbor town with a quiet hush. One night, unable to bear it, Maren took the note and the dog and walked to the city clerk's office. She had no real plan, only a stubborn need to know. The woman behind the counter raised her eyebrows as Maren explained. "A man in a dark coat?" she repeated, feeding the stray. "Yes," Maren said. "He was here almost every evening, but I don't know his name. He left this note." The clerk read it and sighed. There was someone who used to live on Sycamore, a young man named Nathaniel Cooper. He disappeared 5 years ago. "Disappeared?" Maren whispered. "Went out to sea one night in the middle of winter. They never found the boat. Everyone assumed—" She trailed off. Maren felt the cold seep into her bones. She opened her mouth to ask more, but no words came. That night she sat on her porch with Huckleberry pressed against her side, her breath clouding in the frozen air. She thought of the man's face, how she could never quite see it, and of the way he looked at the dog with such weary tenderness. "I'm sorry," he had written. She wondered if he had been saying goodbye. Perhaps he had come back because he could not leave unfinished kindness behind, or because some part of him, wherever it had drifted, still needed to believe he was not entirely alone. Winter deepened. She continued leaving out food for Huckleberry, though he began to follow her inside more often, curling up on the rug as if he'd decided to trust her at last. She found comfort in the small rituals, filling his bowl, brushing the frost from his fur, lighting a candle in the window each evening. Some nights, when the house was very quiet, she thought she heard footsteps on the porch. Once, she woke in the dark and felt the certainty that she was not alone. The air held that same faint scent, cedar, and something that belonged to the sea. She never saw the man again, but she dreamed of him often. Standing in the alley with the dog at his side, his hand extended in a gesture of offering that was also, somehow, a farewell. In the spring, when the first green buds pushed out along the branches and the harbor thawed, Maren stood in the doorway, looking down the empty street. She realized that in all the time she had waited for someone to save her from her loneliness, she had forgotten that she could choose to let someone in. Even if that someone was a stray dog who had once belonged, if only in secret, to a man no one remembered. Even if love, when it finally came, was threaded through with mystery and loss. She felt something uncoil in her chest. A quiet gratitude for whatever force in the world had sent Huckleberry to her doorstep, and for the stranger who had fed him when she could not, whose name she had finally learned, Nathaniel. She whispered it into the morning light as if it were a blessing. That evening, she lit a candle in the window again, not out of longing, but out of remembrance. Huckleberry settled at her feet, his head resting on her knee. The house felt warmer somehow, less hollow. As if the walls themselves had heard her speak that name and had decided to hold it close. And for the first time in years, Maren felt that she had come home. Sometimes the people who touch our lives the deepest are the ones we can never fully explain. And sometimes the love we were searching for comes wrapped in mystery, waiting quietly at our doorstep, with a wagging tail and a story no one else remembers.